The so-called right to try experimental drug law has passed in several other states. The law is designed to help ease suffering for the terminally ill, but some argue it could have a negative effect on drug testing. Joining us is Dr. Gary Firestein, director of the Clinical and Translational Research Institute at UC San Diego, and Linda Clark, a right to try advocate and wife of retired SDSU professor David Huntley, who has ALS, also known as Lou Gehrig's disease. And Linda, I understand your husband was training for a triathlon when he was diagnosed with ALS. It left him in a wheelchair and unable to speak. However, earlier he told us through a text computer, voice computer, that he really wants the chance to try the experimental drug GM604. Let's listen.
I have had ALS for 2.5 years, and based on my progression, will pass in the next 6 to 12 months. There are no drugs in the pipeline for approval in that window, and most of the drugs under investigation at best treat the symptom and not the disease. The early clinical trial of GM604 resulted in a significant slowing or even cessation of progression in 7 of 8 treated patients. When GM604 was given to one other patient outside the clinical trial, he saw modest but measurable improvements in function. If Genervan is forced to go through a phase 3 trial before approval, it will take 3 years, and I, together with 15,000 ALS patients in the U.S. and 300,000 worldwide, will die.
Now, Linda, what have you and David been doing to try to get him access to this GM604 drug?
David first learned about this drug when the manufacturer published their results back in October, and we immediately contacted Genervan, a small biotech firm in Pasadena, to ask them what the next steps were and that we'd like to have access to this drug. We soon found out that we were not alone. There are patients nationwide who read the same information, and we've been working together with them on a campaign to urge the FDA to grant accelerated approval. And the FDA has all those tools in place. They just need to adopt those.
Sure. So because it's not FDA, if I get this right, FDA approved right now, he can't have it right now.
That's correct.
Okay. Dr. Firestein, in January, a California lawmaker introduced a right to try bill that would protect patients and their doctors from legal repercussions if they took experimental drugs, so drugs that hadn't been approved by the FDA yet. What are some of the concerns allowing a terminally ill patient to try an experimental drug?
Well, this is really a reflection of many larger societal issues related to the balance between individual rights and societal needs and population health. It would be very difficult to argue, for instance, that someone that was truly terminal and there was an effective agent out there, that they should not have the right to take this agent. On the other hand, the way clinical trials are performed to test for drug efficacy or benefit is by taking typically 2 groups of patients, sometimes more, and having one get the standard of care that's available, and the other receive the experimental medicine. And then you compare those 2 at the end. In some cases, there are no therapies, such as with ALS, to compare them to. So if there is a bypass pathway by which someone could obtain the medications, then it's a much simpler pathway potentially for patients potentially to take, and I think that it would have an impact on the ability to recruit patients into studies. The other issue is a result of the fact that it is not always easy to assess what is truly hopeless. Sometimes it is obvious. I think with this particular disease, it is obvious. But in other cases, it's not nearly as clear, and the line between what is truly terminal and what is not can be quite fuzzy. And doctors don't have crystal balls necessarily in order to do that.
So just on the clinical trial system, then, could there be a parallel path, perhaps, one for terminally ill patients, so that it didn't skew the current system where you have a double-blind study or a blind study?
Well, there's a couple of possibilities. One is called compassionate use, although that currently the pathway through the FDA from that is rather long and Byzantine in terms of how one ultimately can get the medicine. So there's a lot of obstacles in the way. The alternative also is to have larger and more creative study designs rather than the traditional placebo-controlled studies in order to increase access quicker.
Let me ask Linda, how come the FDA's compassionate law doesn't apply or wouldn't work for David?
There has been one patient that received this drug through compassionate use. It took him over a year to jump through all the hoops to make it available. It took the cooperation of the manufacturer, and they had to basically donate all their time to make it happen. We don't know that they'd be willing to do that again for other patients. It's very costly on the part of the drug maker.
What would you like to see, Linda? How would you like to see this move forward, the right to try? How would you like to get these drugs to people like your husband faster?
Right to try is a step in the right direction. It won't be all that's needed for patients like my husband. Accelerated approval, which has been in place in the FDA since I believe 1993, has all the potential to make this drug available and follow up with controlled data collection so that we learn in the process.
From the process of it. Well, unfortunately, we are out of time. There's a lot more on our website, kpbs.org, about this. Linda Clark and Dr. Gary Firestein, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much.